Hi everybody, my name is Jeremy Siskin. I'm the author of the book, Playing Solo Jazz Piano, and more books called the Jazz Piano Fundamentals series. Hey, here's 3 of them. And I want to do an activity that I do with my community college classes, where we look at 5 different improvisations and we rank them from worst to best. And I love this activity because it shows that there's so much more to improv than scales. I think students are often impatient to learn more scales, fancier scales, more interesting scales, and they think that that's going to make them better improvisers. But I think we're going to learn here, hopefully, fingers crossed, that there's a lot of other musical elements at play that let us have better or worse improvisations. So here's the improvisations that we're going to rank. There's 5 of them. And they're all improvisations over 2-5-1 progressions. And they're all improvisations that use the major scale of the 1 chord, right? So C major in letter A, B flat major in letter B, F major in letter C. Or said another way, we could think of it as using the Dorian mode of the 2 chord, the Mixolydian mode of the 5, and then the major scale or Ionian mode of the 1 chord. So they're all essentially using the same set of notes. We'll see some small exceptions, but we're not doing anything fancy. We're not using any altered scales or anything like that. So let me play these 5 for you, and then we're going to talk through what makes them sound better or worse. So here's letter A. 2, 3, 4. We're going to get now into the key of B flat in our ears, and here's letter B. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's letter C. Now we're getting our ears into F. 1, 2, 3, 4. Letter D, let's get our ears into G major. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then letter E, we'll get our ears into E flat major. 1, 2, ready, and. All right, so everybody think about it. Cast your ballots. What is your order from worst? We'll call worst number 5. We'll call best number 1. Should I play Jeopardy? Let's play a stride version of Jeopardy while you're thinking. I haven't rehearsed this. So, coming back here, I think most of us will agree that B is number 5. Okay, so there's a couple things that are not great about B. So, first of all, we have note choices that don't outline the specific chords very well. In particular, we have this moment where it looks like we're outlining an arpeggio of a chord for the C minor 7, but it's not really quite hitting the notes of the C minor 7. We're kind of outlining a D minor 7 or the 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th of a B flat major 7. So they're not quote unquote wrong notes, but they're not outlining the chords very well. And then on the 1 chord, we're focusing on the 4th, which is a note that demands resolution when we have a chord with a major 3rd. So you probably heard this dissonance. Ugh, disgusting. I hate it. And then furthermore, we have this rhythmic problem. Right? The rhythmic problem is that there's no syncopation. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the word syncopation. I define it as a focus on offbeats, an emphasis on offbeats. So here, all of the long notes, all of the starts of phrase, all of the ends of phrases come on the beat rather than off the beat. All right, so letter B is our last place finisher. And for me, letter A is our second to last place finisher. Let me play letter A for you one more time. So letter A really has that same core problem as letter B, which is that it's lacking syncopation. Everything's coming in on the beat. It also has these really scalar passages. It does leap around a little bit, but it has these just long places where it's just going up and down the scale, which just isn't really that interesting. But compared to letter B, it is somewhat describing the chords well. Some emphasis on somewhat. Particularly, we have this nice leap from G to E, which, the fifth to the third of the major chord. And, we land on the fifth and we land on the root of the major chord here. So, we have some elements that are at least defining the chords. So I think letter A comes in second to last. It just misses meddling, sadly. All right. That leaves us with 3. And to me, my third favorite, the bronze medal winner, is letter D. Let me play letter D one more time. Okay, so now we've got syncopation, right? You could see that here our phrases are starting and they're ending on the offbeats. So that's making this feel more like jazz, more like swing rhythm. And we've got some nice outlining of chords, kind of. It's a little hard to tell. But notice that we have very small intervals. Everything virtually, maybe exactly, is in the interval of a second. And the span, the range between the highest note and the lowest note, is only a fourth. It's going to be really hard to be expressive sounding, to be interesting sounding, to capture an audience using only a span of a fourth, right? It's like people who talk and their voice is really monotone and they just kind of stay in the same pitch, versus somebody who's really expressive is going to engage you much more, right? Now I'm really self-conscious. And so this is, I sometimes call something like this a mumbly improvisation or a mealy-mouthed improvisation, but really it's just boring and not that expressive. And I mentioned that, I think it kind of has good chord tones, like it starts and ends a bunch of phrases on the third of G major. But really what defines chord tones more than anything is leaps. And without any leaps in here, it's hard to feel a strong correlation between the chords and the the melody, the solo. All right, we're to our final 2. And I would give C number 2. So this also has really nice syncopation. Everything is starting and ending on an offbeat. It has much more interesting shape than letter D. You can see that here our span is all the way from a high F to a low C. So we have a span of like almost an octave and a half. And so that's making it much more interesting. And we have greater variety in intervals, right? We have thirds, we have a sixth here, we have a third here. So it's not all seconds. It is still kind of a lot of seconds, but not bad. This little improvisation is actually showing something important, though, that I notice a lot of students struggling with. Do you see in the blue circles that there's a rest every time the chord changes? I see and hear a lot of students doing exactly this. As soon as the chord changes, they rest and then they react to the chord. So if number 3 is a mumbly improvisation, I would call this one a reactive improvisation. And when you're playing a reactive improvisation, I've dropped my pen, excuse me just a moment. Most professional YouTube video. Am I going to edit that out? Heck no. Okay, so when you're playing a reactive improvisation, it basically means that you're playing a separate improvisation, separate small improvisation for each chord, right? It's like there's an improv on G minor, then a little something on C7, then a little something on F major. And if you're wondering if you are a reactive improviser, I want you to notice where most of your phrases start. A lot of reactive improvisers start all of their phrases on either the and of one or beat two. Listen back to your improvisation, try to notice whether that's the case for you. All right, so if that's number 2, we can give number 1 to letter E. Let's play letter E one more time. Okay, so the first thing that you probably notice is that letter E is using a lot of chromatic neighbors. I guess I shouldn't say a lot. I only see 3 here. But just adding in those 3 notes, each of them is a chromatic lower neighbor moving into a note from the key. It gives it a little bit more of a sound of sophistication. It makes it more colorful. Notice too that the shape of this improvisation is just so much more interesting, right? Shape is really important in jazz, and we kind of want our lines to look like a roller coaster. And this one does, whereas I'm not sure, letter C kind of has some of those elements, but this one more than any of the others, I think really does. It also is outlining these chords really nicely, right? We can see that we're moving between important chord tones. And if you're wondering, how do I know which chord tones are important? There's so many of them. My philosophy is 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th. Those are the really key ones. And so here we're going from the 9th to the 7th to the 5th. Here we're leaping from the 5th to the 7th. And then here we've got all these nice leaps, 3, 5, 9, and then 7. So we're outlining the chords individually pretty well too. Okay, so we've got a good shape, we've got some non-chord tones, we're hitting the harmony. One other secret element that's kind of making this tick. So you see, part of the element of it having a nice shape is that there's these really big leaps. And one of the ways that it's creating this leaps is that it's using something called a compound melody. A compound melody is when a single note melody implies multiple melodies. So here's a easy to understand example of a compound melody. So obviously the upper part is playing Ode to Joy, but the bottom part is also forming, it's maybe generous to call that a melody, but it's forming its own little part. It could be. So now the lower part's forming a little bit more of a melody, right? So a wind instrument could play that. So it is a single note melody, but it's clearly implying multiple melodies. Charlie Parker implies compound melodies quite a lot. And you can see here that there's kind of a bottom part and a top part, and these are connecting to one another. It's not as clean as my example, but you can see there's this da da do in the bottom. And so that's one of the elements that's making letter E work, even though it is leaping around a lot. All right, well, thank you for playing along with me on this little activity. I hope you enjoyed that and learned something, all using the same scale, but definitely different levels of sophistication. There's a lot of exercises in Jazz Piano Fundamentals, and if this was a good level for you, Jazz Piano Fundamentals 1 or maybe Jazz Piano Fundamentals Level 2 would be a good choice. So there's a lot of exercises like this that are going to teach you how to incorporate these different elements and not just give you scales, because that's not really teaching you how to make music. That's just teaching you a set of notes. The goal of these books is to really teach you how to make music. All right, so thank you for watching and playing along. If you've made it this far, why don't you comment something about an election? Because we kind of had an election here. And of course, there's an important election going on. See y'all later. Thanks for watching.